Happy Saturday, Risers. Hope you are safe and well. Saagar and I are back with some of our favorite moments from our interviews this week. We had friend of the show, Glenn Greenwald, on to talk about his new show and why he is open to increased surveillance right now during the coronavirus pandemic. Katie Halper joined us to discuss her recent interview with Tara Reade, the former Joe Biden staffer who has accused the former vice president of sexual assault dating back to his time in the Senate. And we also spoke with Professor Harvey J.K. about how progressive ideals are emerging during the pandemic.
One of the overarching themes of this week was how the government is going to try and boost the economy to speed up the post-coronavirus recovery. And we heard a lot of different perspectives on what needs to be done and how quickly things will be back up. On Wednesday, Marc Lotter, the director of strategic communications for the Trump campaign, he shared an optimistic outlook of the emergency stimulus package and the prospects of recovery. Let's take a listen.
Well, I think there's a difference between long-term policies and dealing with the crisis at hand. What you saw was Democrats and Republicans coming together to get money into the hands of Americans and to small businesses who are affected because of the coronavirus through no fault of their own. But going now and talking about raising trillions of dollars in new taxes and doing the things that really caused our economy to have such a slow and stagnant recovery under the Obama-Biden years, rather than on the rocket that we had of economic growth during President Trump's first 3 years, and I'm confident we'll be back once we get through this crisis. I think it's a very stark reality.
So this was actually in response to a question I asked him about, because he was doing the same old, like, oh, Joe Biden, he's this radical leftist who's embraced all of Bernie Sanders' position. I wish.
I don't know why they keep saying that.
I wish that was the case.
Yeah.
And so I asked him this question, like, don't you think after we are in this crisis and just spent $2 trillion on recovery that the how will you pay for it argument is maybe not as salient or landing as well as it might have at another time, and no real adjustment there in terms of his talking points?
No, this is something that people are very wedded to in the Republican establishment. The idea that people vote on tax increase and all that. And I just don't think any of that is true. I really don't. I mean, I think there's some section of the electorate, but I think much more of it is based upon rejection of economic centrism and all of that than it is anything else. And then, of course, culture plays such a massive role that most people completely understand. But broadly, in terms of his point, I don't know if it's true, because people are going to need to have money in order to spend, and I just don't see where that money is going to come from. D.C. has basically shown they will not backfill Americans' pocketbooks after this crisis. They will backfill corporations' pocketbooks, which means massive consolidation. People left out to pasture, tens of millions literally left out in the I mean, they're going to have some unemployment, but that ain't going to be enough in order to actually meaningfully spend. Small businesses like restaurants, so much of our economy tied up, so much of our community tied up in these places, gone. I don't know. I think we're going to in for a couple of years of hurt, only because I don't trust the government to do anything about it.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. I mean, we like having Marc on to get that insight into how, you know, at least parts of the Trump campaign are viewing things. And I thought maybe we'd hear a little bit of a different approach at this moment, but not really. Seems like they're, at this point, going with the same playbook that they were planning on.
As usual, Trump is the only person on his staff who, like, really understands why he won.
Right.
And, the only way that you could get a real response is to go and talk to Trump himself.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll keep putting in that request
I will.
for the president. Maybe you can get another sit down with him. We also heard from Jason Furman. He is the former top economic advisor for the Obama administration. He had a much more grave outlook for the post-virus economy and shared some lessons from the 2008 economic crash. Let's listen.
One lesson is it's just hard to imagine how big things are. And so you want to stay one or two steps ahead. A month ago, no one was calling for anything like this. Even 3 weeks ago, there were people talking about $100 billion, and then Congress passed $2 trillion, which is great. But a second lesson is it's not just the short, sharp period, it's that these things can last a while. The unemployment rate next year in 2021, even if we discover a vaccine, is likely to be significantly elevated because of all the trauma the economy has gone through. And so making sure you have programs that aren't just big up front, but that you continue them, you stick with it. You could include triggers to make sure they automatically continue. And that's what Congress is going to need to do. They're going to need to come back and do more of what they've done and have it last longer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, which is that with that, like I was just saying, without significant economic stimulus, this country won't be back to where it is. I'm talking not $2 trillion, maybe like 10 trillion
Yeah.
in order to get things back to revving.
Absolutely. And we pushed him a little bit on the response to 2008 and lessons learned in terms of, what we've been concerned about here is that because big corporations are getting so much more than small businesses, that you're going to have another wave of consolidation, another wave that just makes the big guys bigger and crushes the small guys. And he said he shares the same concerns, but that he thought the answer was to put more money in the hands of workers and small businesses rather than less in big business. My view, you could do a little bit of both.
Yeah, but also, I mean, he knows this. Washington is a finite game, which is that ultimately
you get one shot at it.
You get one shot, and usually you have to go all in for something in order to even get 10% of what you want.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Still hasn't learned much from the Obama administration. No surprise there. Finally, we wanted to highlight part of our conversation with Josh Barro, business columnist from New York Magazine, host of Left, Right, and Center on KCRW. He stressed that reopening the economy is not as simple as just turning on an open sign and unlocking the doors of businesses across the country. Let's take a look.
I think the people are also making a bit of an error of thinking of reopening as a binary switch. I think we are not going to be seeing concerts for some time. There are certain restrictions that are likely to need to be in place until you either have a vaccine or a very effective medical therapy, so that this is just considered a much less serious illness. And I don't know when or whether we're going to get either of those. But I do think that in certain parts of the country, you will have you will beat the acute outbreak, and you'll be able to ease off of some of the social distancing measures at some point. I mean, I don't want to put a date to it, but I think conceivably within that 4-month window of the length of the unemployment benefits. But I think that's also going to be regional. It's quite possible that you're going to have some parts of the country that remain much more shut down than others at certain times. And so you might have different needs in different parts of the country in terms of unemployment policy.
I just saw some new polling that says basically a majority of Americans believe, even if the government were to say today, like, it's all good, go back out there, that they would not. And that just goes to underscore, like, some people are staying home because the government is telling them to, but most people are staying home because they want to be safe. And so the top priority, if you want to get the economy back to normal, is to make people safe, make it safe for people to go back out, and then people will go back out.
And this has been a huge thing on the right. There are so many of these guys who are out there who are like, reopen the economy. They're saying the models aren't perfect. And yeah, you know what? They're right. Models actually did massively underperform whenever it came to predicting cases in the United States. But again, it's not about reopening the economy. You can't reopen the economy when consumers have no confidence. So what do we have to do? Make sure that we have the confidence in testing, in contract tracing, in supplies for healthcare workers.
Right.
All that has to be in place before people will feel comfortable going back to work. I'm not going out to eat until I know that people have widespread testing. I'm not going to engage in that behavior. That's a blow to a lot of people. I don't think I'm alone in doing that. So the government and everybody has to step up and make sure that those benchmarks are hit. That's what they should be obsessing over. How can we start to hit a benchmark as soon as possible to get people out instead of being like, just go out, resume life. Nobody's going to do that.
No one is going to do that until they feel like they and their families are safe.
And
that it's responsible to do.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of a funny position coming from the sort of libertarian right, because you would think they would have an understanding that people make their own decisions.
Yeah, right.
Yes, the government can give you guidance and people look to that, and that's important and it matters that government officials are responsible. But bottom line is, a lot of us were making changes and different choices in our lives even before the government came out and said, you must do this. So you would think they would have a little more understanding of that.
And yet, there's a lot of things.
That's a rabbit hole there. Knows. All right, that does it for us. We'll be back later today with our recurring segment breaking down the week that was in media screw-ups.
And tomorrow we're going to be back, of course, for another round of #RisingQs. We'll see you guys then.
Enjoy, guys.